A common layout of a page is to break it up into two columns, oftentimes about a third on the left-hand side and two-thirds on the right-hand side. And you can accomplish that very easily using Bootstrap. Um, and so let me show you. Let's create here a directory where we can play around with that. so, um, so layout. We'll call this maybe left, right. And in here, let's create a file where we can we can play around with that idea. So let's load the Bootstrap library using href. So go up a couple of directories into CSS and then load the Bootstrap and then tell the browser that this is a style sheet. So to accomplish this, we can use the classes row and column to break up the page into different columns. So for instance, we can say that we're going to have a row made up of several columns. Right? So we could say maybe div class column. Now notice that the column class, there are many different versions of the column class that allow you to break it up in different columns, but also depending on the size of the screen. So for instance, this column class has different versions of this, right? So all these say that these are all applicable for large screens, right? So that's what the LG here stands for, LG1, LG2. The 1, 2, the numerals here identify how many columns do we want this particular column to span. Using a Bootstrap grid system, the page is broken up into 12 equal parts. Right. So let's say that we want to you say that we want to break it up into a column that spans 4 columns. Right. I think this is I made a mistake here. This is class row. And the right hand side column would be split up into it would span across 8 of those 12 columns. Notice that both of these columns add up to 12, right? So again, the logical breakup of the page from Bootstrap's point of view is to break up the page into 12 equal parts. And then your content can span across as many columns as you want. So let's put some content here just to show how this would look like. So H1 might say, let's say that this is left content, and maybe under here for the right hand side we might say that this is the right content. So if we navigate to this in our browsers, it would look something like this. Let's see, Bootstrap, and this is layout, left, right. And there we go, right? So notice that the left-hand side, right, has been is showing here, and it's a 1/3 of the width of the page, and the right-hand side is 2/3 of the right of the. So the right-hand side is twice as big as the left-hand side, and you can decide what is the ratio on how is that you want to break up the content. Now, it often happens that we want to be able to hide one of these contents depending on the size of the screen. So, for instance, we might say that that if it gets to really tiny screens, the left-hand side should not show. Right? I only want to show the right-hand side. Right now, we don't have that kind of logic. So what happens here is notice that the ratio is maintained at all screen sizes, right? The left-hand side is always 1/3 and the right-hand side is always 2/3, right? And the reason we have that is that we're using this XS, right? What XS says that for screens, for extra small screens and above, the ratio will be 4:8, right? Or 1/3, 2/3. That means that for extra small screens, also including small screens and medium-sized screens and large screens, right? So all size screens, right? And whereas we can use other versions of these which will have different effects that will apply to only a particular size screen. So for instance, if I make this large, and then I say that this ratio only applies to LG, or large screens, right? What this means is that this styling only applies to large screens. It does not apply for small screens, medium screens, or extra small screens. So if I refresh the page, notice that I still have the ratio on really big screens, but as I resize this and become smaller screens, right? Notice that we don't have that ratio anymore. They wrap, right? They behave like blocks, like regular divs, right? That they take up the entire width of the page, right? And they don't fit. And that's why you have this wrapping, right? So you can target different size screens. So for instance, we might say we want this to apply also to a little tinier screen, like maybe like medium-sized screens, right? And what this says is that this applies to medium screens and higher, right? Also large screens. So if we refresh over here, we'll notice that we're before used to wrap like here medium-sized screens, but when we get to small screens, now it wraps, right? So it does not apply to small screens, and it doesn't apply to extra small screens. We could keep going, right, to the other versions. But what I'd like to show you is that oftentimes what happens is that for really tiny screens, perhaps we might want to just hide the left hand side altogether. So we might say that this size of the column span, right, might only apply to medium-sized screens and above, but for extra small screens, right, we want to just hide this entirely. One way to accomplish that is to use the hidden classes and say that for extra small screens, right, we just don't want to show this at all. That would mean that this column, right, it would not appear in extra small screens. But then what would happen to the content of this over here? Let's see what happens, right? So say we would have a paragraph on either side. Let's copy a long paragraph just to show what would happen. Let's go to lorem ipsum and copy some content here. Let's copy this over here. Let's paste this, right? And let's do the same thing for the left-hand side. Right, so let's go back, and if we go to full screen, we refresh. There we go, right? So let's see what happens if we start resizing this and we get all the way down to extra small screens. There we go. So notice that the left-hand side is gone for the extra small screens. So that looks okay. But notice that there's an intermediate portion here that we're going from this is medium, this is small, and then all the way down to extra small. We have this intermediate step where both are showing, but they're resizing, right? They don't have enough space, and we're still showing this left content. So basically, I think what we want to be able to say is that yes, we wanted to hide an extra small, but the ratio of 4 to 8 should still apply for small screens, right? Small screen and higher, right? But when we get to extra small screens, we want to hide that, right? So let's try this again. So let's bring it up and refresh. And so let's see. Let's keep going down further, and we'll notice that when we go to the extra small screens, right? There we go. Notice that the left-hand side disappears. Left side disappears, and the right content works just fine. Okay. So yeah, so there's a mechanism that allows us to hide and show different portions of the screen, columns that we might not want to show at smaller screens.